2 balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Let's Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by Daniel Starkand, and on what should have been a complete celebration of Dodgers baseball, of Clayton Kershaw setting a franchise record, turns into a pretty pathetic 5-1 loss. Obviously, we'll get to Dave Roberts. We'll get to the Dodgers offense. Daniel, the storyline here, though, is Clayton Kershaw setting a franchise record for strikeouts. This is the greatest pitcher of our generation. This is one of the greatest pitchers of all time. Obviously, the Dodgers may be one of the few franchises that there's a little bit of a debate. Is he the best pitcher in franchise history? But tonight he sets the franchise record. He does it in classic Kershaw fashion. There's a fastball strikeout, a curveball strikeout, a slider strikeout. He had everything working. He gets the strikeout. Pretty emotional moment for Clayton Kershaw.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna choose to remember about this game, because outside of that, it sucked. But yeah, I mean, Clayton Kershaw, there's no greater than him. It's been kind of building up to this for a few starts now. We weren't sure exactly when he was gonna do it. He only needed 3 to tie and 4 to pass it coming into tonight, so it was pretty much a foregone conclusion that he was gonna get it. And he did, and like you said. He had everything working tonight. He had the fastball, he had the slider, mixing in the curveball a little bit. So another great start for him, but unfortunately, not much else positive to take away from this game.
Yeah, Clayton Kershaw, 2,696 was the franchise record heading into the night. Kershaw was just 3 strikeouts away from tying that mark as he entered, and just doing a little bit of digging and thinking back on Kershaw's career. I mean, May 25th, 2008, Kershaw was wearing number 54 for the Dodgers. He makes his major league debut against future teammate Skip Schumacher. He strikes him out. The first batter he ever faces, he strikes out. Fast forward April 30th, 2022, nearly 14 years later, wearing the number that we've all become now accustomed to, the perfectly symmetrical number 22. Kershaw's still at it. He adds 7 more strikeouts. He breaks the franchise's record that was set 43 years ago. I mean, it was crazy. Don Sutton, the last strikeout he threw was about 5 months after Clayton Kershaw was born in 1988. And so you go back to all of that. Clayton Kershaw, again, finishes the night tonight. I wouldn't say a perfect performance, but all in all, a strong performance. 6 innings, 4 hits, 1 earned run, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts. And uncharacteristic for him, which, might have contributed to some of it. Obviously, the pressure that I'm sure he felt. This isn't somebody who's immune to pressure, but you could tell he was aware of what was going on. The crowd, every time he got to 2 strikes, was cheering, standing, phones out. Then all of a sudden he ties the record. There's a little bit of a moment and celebration. Then he breaks the record. He gives the hat tip to the crowd, standing ovation. Freddie Freeman's clapping, Austin Barnes stepping off. And Kershaw, you could tell he just wanted to get back in there. So I'm sure sort of an amazing night for Clayton Kershaw. Also probably a pretty strange one, I would imagine.
Yeah, we definitely know how routine oriented he is. So yeah, even just taking a couple seconds to acknowledge, the fans cheering for him. That's something that he typically doesn't like to do. I thought it was cool that he did do it. It's obviously a very special moment, and weeks and months, years from now, when we look back on this game, it's all going to be about Kershaw and his milestone. Like, no one cares about, like, we care about right now, we care about the results, but down the road, no one's going to care that the Dodgers lost to the Tigers on April 30th. So I thought it was cool that he kind of recognized how special a moment that was. I thought the fans obviously did a great job, giving him the ovation that he deserves. Like you said, it was kind of a weird night just because up until he gets that strikeout, like, that's all anyone can talk about. That's all anyone can think about. Like you said, every time he gets 2 strikes on a guy, like, everyone's just waiting for that strikeout. And obviously, he didn't strike. It felt like the Tigers were like trying not to strike out. Like, they weren't, like, it didn't feel like they were up there trying necessarily to get hits. They were just trying to hit the ball, which I guess, that strategy wound up working out for them. But for the most part, it was kind of a weird night, and I'm sure Clayton's kind of happy just to get it
Yeah.
over with, so he could kind of get back
Yeah.
to his routine and just focus on pitching as opposed to all that other
Yeah, and
stuff.
we'll get to the game here in just a little bit. I do think this is a moment that's worthy of pausing and hovering over for a little bit. I mean, and when Clayton Kershaw, by the way, when he breaks this record, I believe, when he tied the record, the Dodgers are winning 1-0, and so you're kind of thinking at that point, all right, like the offense will figure this out. Mookie Betts leadoff home run, he's mowing the Tigers down at this point. And then things sort of get a little bit off the rails. He gives up a run. The game's tied. The Dodgers offense falls apart. They finish with just 4 hits in the entirety of the game. But I want to sit on Clayton Kershaw here for a second. I posted something on Twitter that Clayton Kershaw is a unique person for me to root for. Of all the teams that I root for, and most people probably have one team that they're obsessed with, passionate about. I'm a total psychopath when it comes to that, because there are multiple, whether it's Oregon Ducks football, Oregon Ducks basketball that I like, the Oakland Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders, the list goes on. Teams that I care passionately about. The Dodgers are atop that list. But Clayton Kershaw, I've never had a player that I would say impacts me in the same way. And what I mean is, when Clayton Kershaw has successful moments, it feels like I personally am having a successful moment. When Clayton Kershaw is getting criticized, when he's struggling, when he is at the lowest point, it feels like I personally am at the lowest point with him. And I posted, I said, maybe that has something to do with my defensive nature and the fact that he's had to wear a lot of bad situations he's been placed into by bad managers in postseason, bad roster management, and it's sort of creation that was a result of some of that stuff as well. I'm curious, do you sort of agree with that? I mean, do you sort of identify with Clayton Kershaw in a way that is unique among any other maybe pitcher, athlete, player that you follow?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'd say the only other athlete that I would put on that level is Kobe, and it's kind of, for similar reasons, I'd say. I'd say the main reason is just because, like, how long they've been, how long Clayton's been a Dodger for almost, 15 years now or whatever it is. I think it's his 15th season. The Dodgers drafted him in the first round. He comes up when he's 20 years old. So we've known him since he was a kid. Now, obviously, he's a grown man. He's got, 4 or 5 kids or whatever it is. And he's never put on another uniform. And he, like, I know it's kind of cliche to say he's left it all out on the field, but he really has. Like, that guy's put his blood, sweat, and tears into the Dodgers organization. You won't find anyone that's more competitive. You won't find anyone that works harder. You won't find anyone that wants to win more. So I think all of that just kind of plays into it. Like you said, we've been through the highs and the lows with him. We've defended him when things haven't gone well. We've witnessed his greatness for all these years. And through it all, he's not only been an incredible baseball player, but he's also just been an incredible citizen. Like, the work he does in the community, him and his wife, he's just a great person. So I think there's not, athletes like that don't come around too often. So yeah, for me, like, as a Dodger and Laker fan, it was Kobe at first.
Yeah.
He played for the Lakers 20 years, obviously, and ever since then, it's been Clayton Kershaw. He's been pretty much the one sports constant in our lives, and it's really cool that he's still pitching at such a high level.
Yeah.
We weren't sure. First of all, we weren't even sure if he was going to be back with the Dodgers. Like, he went into the lockout as a free agent, and he signs, as guys are reporting to spring training. And second of all, we didn't know if he was going to be healthy. Obviously, he misses the postseason last year with the elbow issue. We weren't sure. He doesn't undergo Tommy John, so we weren't exactly sure how healthy he was coming into spring training. And so far this season, he's been awesome. So it's been really cool to watch, and just, just an awesome moment for him tonight.
Yeah, I didn't expect myself to necessarily feel anything. I mean, some of these records feel very arbitrary to me. I'm not going to remember where I was when he broke this record or anything like that. But it was a cool moment, and I found myself saying, like, hey, like, kind of like you said, we don't know how many more of these we have with Clayton Kershaw. And again, to see somebody who I feel like deserves it so much, who I feel like has been so great for so long and so loyal and so faithful and so committed to his craft and has been so fantastic, and yet maybe doesn't get appreciated. And I'm sure he gets appreciated more than my mind sort of allows me to believe. But when I think about the playoff Kershaw stuff, these are the moments that I like to celebrate and say, hey, yeah, he is this good. And to see him up there against Miguel Cabrera, I mean, I tweeted, I was like, this might be the best hitter of a generation versus the best pitcher of a generation. And obviously how you define generation is going to impact the Cabrera piece of that. because you have guys like Mike Trout coming up behind him and some of the guys that were before him as well. But just an unbelievable moment for Clayton Kershaw. And just a reminder, by the way, that this is not the end necessarily. I mean, 6 innings pitched, one earned run, 7 strikeouts. Clayton Kershaw still has it. I know you know, one of your bold predictions was that he's a dark horse in the Cy Young conversation. And I mean, so far so good on that front, absolutely. All right, looking at the comments, thank you to all of the folks joining us on Facebook, joining us on YouTube as well. Let's get into the game itself. The Dodgers come into the game heavy favorites against a Tigers team that, if we're being honest, you look down the lineup, you look down the rotation, not very good. I'm going to guess no Dodger fans, 1% of Dodger fans had heard of the guy who was facing the Dodgers on the other side, and yet the Dodger offense can't get anything going. Mookie Betts leads off the game with a home run. From that point forward, the offense musters just 3 hits. That's a 1-out single in the third, a 2-out double in the fourth, and a 1-out single in the seventh. They put together a couple moments where you feel like, hey, maybe they can get some runs across. I believe they put 2 runners on in the third inning, I believe. And then Chris Taylor, a 2-out double in the fourth inning. Neither of those comes to anything. Cody Bellinger with a big leadoff walk in the bottom of the seventh. Gavin Lux with the slap single. That's a moment that we're going to talk about here in a minute with Austin Barnes comes up and hitting into a double play. But that was kind of it. So, I mean, not to go big picture quite yet, because I see people in the chat that want to talk about the Dodgers offense as a whole. But in this game, what happened with the Dodgers offense? What did you see with why they just couldn't string together any sort of rally?
Yeah, it was a weird game offensively just because, like, it felt like guys were taking pretty good at bats. Like, Justin Turner had, like, a 14-pitch at bat in there. You mentioned, like, the belly walk. Like, it's weird because, like, they're not scoring runs, but you still look up and it's, like, the fourth inning and the opposing starter's at 80 pitches. So you're like, all right, like, if we keep taking these at bats, eventually we're going to break through and score some runs. But it just never happened. And those nights are going to happen over the course of the season. But yeah, I mean, it's been kind of happening a lot. It's weird. Like, you look at the overall stats, like, if you just go down the lineup, like, outside of, like, Freddie Freeman and, like, Chris Taylor, like, no one has a very impressive slash line right now. But hey, the Dodgers are still winning, so that's good. But and obviously offensive numbers are down across baseball right now because they they deadened the balls or whatever. But at the same time, they clearly have not performed up to where they should be, and I'm not super worried by any means, but you just don't want nights like tonight to become a theme, and I don't think they will, but it was just an off night overall.
Yeah, you say. I mean, you look down, Mookie Betts is hitting 230, Freddie Freeman 299, Trey Turner's hitting 276, but he's got an on base of just 329. Max Muncy hitting 136, Justin Turner 197, Cody Bellinger 205, Chris Taylor 290, Gavin Lux 255, and Austin Barnes 211. I want to highlight a couple of those guys real quick because you look at some of those big names. Cody Bellinger's in an 0 for 18 stretch in which he has not gotten a hit in 5 straight games. Max Muncy is in a 1 for 23 stretch. Justin Turner in a 4 for 33 stretch. Austin Barnes, who I joke doesn't necessarily belong in this conversation, but is 0 for 10 and hitless in his last 4 appearances as well. You point out, hey, I'm not worried about these guys, and yet some of those guys, and these are conversations that I like having with you because Matt and I have had them a couple of times, but you go down that list, Bellinger, Muncy, Turner, and again, I'm not going to include Barnes in that list. Bellinger, Muncy, and Justin Turner, are any of those guys on a list of concern for you, or are all those guys, hey, it's a slump, it happens, they'll bounce back?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's certain individuals that it's fair to be concerned about. I think Cody Bellinger's obviously at the top of the list. Like, we were all, myself, I know I was pretty quick to declare him just about back when he's named NL Player of the Week, and he hasn't gotten a hit since then. So, could we just get somewhere in the middle of those two? Like, we don't need the Player of the Week, but we also don't need the guy who's getting out every single time. Like, give us something in the middle and we're fine. Obviously, we've seen the last few nights his defense is still just outstanding, so he's still bringing value no matter what. But at the same time, he again looks lost at the plate, so that's not exactly ideal. Justin Turner, you're a little concerned just because he's getting up there in age a little bit. But at the same time, he homers last night. He's a historically slow starter. Like, the guy never hits home runs in April. So I think you still got to give it a few more weeks. Max Muncy, I think he's still taking his walks. Obviously, he's batting 139 or whatever you said.
136.
That's 136. It doesn't get much worse than that. So it could only go up from there. But yeah, I definitely think there's certain guys that it's fair to be, a little concerned about. I just don't think as a whole, I still think that, it's still a really good offense as a whole. But I think it's still, it's still April 30th here. The season started a little late. I think in the coming weeks, we should start to see a lot of these guys start to heat up.
Yeah, I mean, Max Muncy's a funny one because his .313 on base percentage is just 16 points behind Trey Turner. Nobody in here would be calling out Trey Turner and saying he's struggling, and yet Muncy's reaching at almost the same rate. So for me, Muncy is, of the three, the guy that I'm not that worried about. We know he's coming off of an injury. We know that he's adjusting defensively to playing more second base, playing more third base, getting used to the designated hitter role. Bellinger and Turner are the two guys that I'm concerned. You pointed out Justin Turner does have 2 extra base hits in the last couple of games, a home run last night, a double the night before, but another 0 for tonight again. He's stuck in a 4 for 33 slump. He's not drawing walks. That's part of the thing that concerns me. Yes, he's hitting 197. He's hitting 60 points higher than Max Muncy is. His on-base percentage is 70 points lower. So that tells you how many walks Muncy is drawing and how few Turner is. Turner has a lower on-base percentage than every other player in the Dodgers lineup. He's 30 points behind Cody Bellinger. He's 40 points behind Austin Barnes. He's the one that concerns me because I keep saying it, and I don't want to be right on this one. But at some point, that cliff is going to come. These guys do not typically slowly degrade. We know how good he was. It just seems to be one of those things that you wake up one year, and for whatever reason, it just isn't clicking the same way that it has before. I hope I'm wrong on that, but he concerns me. And Cody Bellinger, it's like you said, everybody wants to declare him back as soon as he has a good 4 or 5 days. He follows it up by 0 for 18. And again, hitless in 5 straight games. Until he can not put together these stretches of games, I'm going to be concerned. I mean, because on one hand, we could say, hey, look how many multi-hit games Cody Bellinger has this season. And yes, that's a good thing. That's a sign of a guy that, you'd like to say, hey, that's a sign of a guy that's hitting the ball well. Well, you could go the opposite way and say, how many hitless games does Cody Bellinger have? It'd take me a while to count these up, but 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 hitless games for Cody Bellinger this season. I don't know how many starts he has, how many games played he's had. Let's see. So he's played 20 games this year. He is hitless in 11 of them. That's insane. This is over 50. What's that? 55% of the games that he's played this season, he has not gotten a hit. I mean, yes, the weighted runs created plus is still above 100 because he has all those multi-hit games, but man, 26 strikeouts and 73 at-bats for Cody Bellinger. He's the one of those three that I would say I am the most worried about. Looking at the comments real quick, Daniel Moreno, Turner, and Muncy both crap at the moment. Nomo FOMO, I missed last week's Cody. Yes, we all do, I think, on that one. THP says Muncy has an insane 20% walk rate, so there you go. I think tonight he might have surpassed more strikeouts than walks for the first time, but it was the opposite for a while. THP says Bellinger's outs in Arizona were at least hard hit line drives. His hard hit numbers, I did say on Monday's show. Now, this was Monday's show, so he's gone 0 for since then, but his hard hit numbers were trending in the right direction. So there we go.
And it's tough because you see, like, in the 7th inning tonight, he takes a great at-bat, draws 12-pitch walk, which, could have started a rally, and you're like, wow, that's a great at-bat. But if you look within that at-bat, like, there was a couple very hittable pitches that he winds up fouling off that, like, when Cody Bellinger is right, like, he takes that. There's one specific pitch that, they were calling for a high fastball. The guy misses his spot. It winds up being low and in, right in Belly's happy zone, and all he does is foul it off. So, you like that, he's able to at least foul it off and not miss him, and he draws a big walk there, but at the same time, it's clear that he's not right now.
That's actually a great point, Daniel, and I'm glad that you made it because I was thinking the same thing. Yes, you can point to that, whatever it was, 12-pitch walk that it was, and say, hey, that's a great at-bat, and you're 75% right on that one if somebody were to say that's a great at-bat. The 25% is exactly like you said. There's a couple fastballs and sliders that were middle in, belt high, that he's fouling off and not lining into, for extra bases into right field. And so, again, it could be worse. It could have been a strikeout. Yes, he's fouling the ball off, but it could have been a lot better as well. And until we can sort of consistently see that better, I'm going to be concerned. That same inning is kind of where a big moment took place. This was a flashpoint if you're on Dodgers Twitter. Cody Bellinger walks. Chris Taylor strikes out. Gavin Lux slaps a single. The Dodgers finally get a little bit of luck on their side. We'll talk about how unlucky I think some of the bullpen arms were tonight. The Dodgers at this point are down 4-1. Austin Barnes is due up. He's the ninth hitter. They bring in a new pitcher to face Austin Barnes, Will Smith. In case you didn't know, one of the best hitting catchers, one of the best catchers, period, in all of baseball, had the night off tonight because Clayton Kershaw was pitching. Clayton Kershaw not in the game anymore. Runners on first and second. Austin Barnes stays in the game, grounds into a double play, rally ends, and that's a wrap. I have people on Twitter telling me, hey, this is what the Dodgers do. It was an off day. He always gets an off day. They weren't going to bring him in. I get the whole, hey, you only have two catchers. What happens if Will Smith gets hurt? Blah, blah, blah. None of it makes sense to me. Like, if you care about winning this game, it's indefensible to leave Austin Barnes in. I'm not going to say I expected a double play, but anybody who said they were expecting a base hit would just be lying to you based on statistics and numbers in general. I mean, is there any piece of that decision that's defensible in your mind?
No, it's totally indefensible if you ask me. Like you said, I mean, it's defensible if you're not trying to win the game.
Yeah.
but if you're, I mean, that was basically, that was your best opportunity to score right there. Like, you haven't scored all night hardly. You got 2 on with 1 out. You know, even if you don't go, like, you could still go with Edwin Rios there. You get a lefty up there. You know, I don't think Will Smith catching the last 2 innings of a game, like, you could still call that a night off, in my opinion. Like, that's not that big of a deal. Also, you got an off day coming up on Monday.
2 days from now.
Yeah, like, there's plenty of time to get rest here. To me, that's your best chance to score right there. And it's like, we don't even get a chance to get mad before Austin Barnes swinging at the first pitch and hitting into a double play. Like, that to me, you know, it just didn't make any sense. For me, I personally would have went with Rios right there. I think that's a great spot for him. That guy, you know, he doesn't have as many pinch hit opportunities because there's a DH, like, you're not pinch hitting for the pitcher every night. So he's a guy who he needs to stay relevant. He needs some at bats. That, to me, that was a perfect spot right there. And even if he gets out, even if Barnes gets out, like, to me, you just got to avoid a double play right there. Like, you got the top of the order coming up right after that. The one thing I would rather Austin Barnes stand up there and hold the bat on his shoulders and not swing it than do what he did. So to me, the game was lost right there. It was unfortunate. Like, that was the one little bit you got was just taken right from you, like, in one pitch. Like, it was just totally indefensible. If you ask me, I don't understand the rest argument. Like I just said, you got an off day on Monday. Even hell, start Austin Barnes again tomorrow if you're that concerned about rest. Like, I don't care. Like, to me, that's a spot where this is the game right here. This is our best chance to score, and we need, you know, some sort of offensive threat at the plate.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Will Smith. So Will Smith, by the way, is a 27-year-old young man who is in peak physical condition. He just turned 27 at the end of March, all right? Will Smith, today is Saturday, for those who may have lost track. Will Smith did not play on Thursday. Will Smith did not play on Sunday. And Will Smith did not play last Thursday. Will Smith will not play last Monday. So I don't know, what's that, a week and a half, and he's going to have had 4 off days. To me, it's exactly like you said. Even if you're so freaked out about Will Smith and it needs to be an off day, then let Austin Barnes start again tomorrow. Like, let Austin DH Will Smith. I know Will Smith still, I believe, has still not been a DH at any point this season. But just to clarify, so you would have actually gone Rios as a pinch hitter and then bring Will Smith in as a defensive replacement? You wouldn't have just let Will Smith hit there?
I mean, I would have been fine with either, to be honest. I probably would have went Rios to get the lefty-righty matchup. But I would have been fine with either. Obviously, I love Will Smith as a hitter, so I have no problem with them just sending him up there. But I don't know. Rios hasn't gotten many at-bats, and I think he's done pretty well when he has. And I think anytime you could create an opportunity to at least get him a look up there, I don't think that's a bad thing.
Let's talk about the other Dave Roberts kind of conversation piece of the night. That was the bullpen and the decisions and how that all played out. So Clayton Kershaw leaves the game after 6 innings. Again, 4 hits, 1 earned run, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts. He throws just 85 pitches, but I would say a a taxing 85 pitches. He did have a little bit of traffic, and you could just tell that the whole strikeout thing was wearing on him. It looked like he was pulling back for a little bit extra. You've got the breaks in there, yada, yada, yada. So I'm fine with the decision to pull Kershaw after an inning, after a clean, full sixth inning, 85 pitches. They go to Phillips, Gratterall, and Maranta. Okay, let me be clear. I have nothing against Evan Phillips. I think he's fantastic. I have nothing against Gratterall. I think he's fantastic. I pretty much have no opinion on Maranta, so we'll just leave that one alone. All three of those guys pitched yesterday. Now, you might say, hey, this is Major League Baseball. These are grown men. Who cares? They pitched 2 days in a row. Remember, the Dodgers currently have 15 pitchers on their roster, 5 of those starting pitchers. So they've got a 10-man bullpen at the moment. They had 4 relief pitchers pitch yesterday, the other one being Bickford. They had an off day, as you said, on Monday. Nobody knows what tomorrow is going to look like. They decide to go with Phillips. They decide to go with Gratterall. They decide to go with Maranta. And those three end up combining to allow 4 earned runs. Now, I would like to make the point that there was a lot of bad luck with that. Evan Phillips throws a nasty slider that hits a guy. Then there's a seeing eye ground ball through the right side. Then he gets back-to-back strikeouts. And then, it just felt unlucky. Gratterall ends up coming in at some point. There's like a 73-mile-an-hour single through the left side of the infield. And so I think the bullpen got a little bit unlucky. I mean, Maranta, 3 strikeouts an inning pitched, but that was the other thing. Then you bring Kimbrel into a game because he hasn't pitched enough. So you've got a mix of 3 guys who pitched yesterday and 1 guy who hasn't pitched in a week. I mean, I'll be honest. I look at the roster and I say, okay, do you go to Vestia there? You can't go to Bickford because he's in the same category. You've got Daniel Hudson. You've got Justin Brule. You've got Clevenger. You've got Fulmer, who they just called up today. Like, there are other guys who were fresh. These are guys that Phillips and Gratterall at least are guys that you trust more than I would say most of the names that I just said. But what did you think of that decision? I'll admit, I still don't like it. But in hindsight, I'm like, I don't know. Maybe you like the righty matchup so you don't go to Vestia and Brule. And there's a pretty big gap, I would say, between Phillips and Gratterall and the rest of those guys. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I'd say, like, with the Barnes thing that we just talked about, obviously, like, I don't see a single defense for that. I'd say there's a little bit more of a defense for this. I think, I'd have to see what Dave Roberts says, but I'd have to imagine this was kind of like a planned type of thing. Like, I think,
maybe not Maranta. Maybe Maranta is because at that point it's a 4-1 game or something like that. But yeah, you've got to assume that Phillips Phillips was warming early, so regardless of what the score was, it felt like he was coming in.
Yeah, I just think, like, the Dodgers bullpen is kind of, like, still in spring training mode. Like, they haven't used a ton of guys on back-to-back days so far. Obviously, they've kind of eased guys into things. And I think it was just kind of a plan, like, going into the week, like, hey, like, Phillips and Gratterall, we're going to get them a back-to-back at some point this week so they could kind of start to build up that strength, just because as the season goes along, once the rosters get cut a little bit and you have fewer guys in your bullpen, you're obviously going to need guys to go back-to-back. So I think that was kind of a plan thing. Like you mentioned, a ton of other names, guys that are a lot fresher. Like, obviously, Dave Roberts knows that those 3 guys all pitched last night. Like, it's not like he thought they were fresh or something like that. So I think it was just kind of a plan type of deal. Like, we want to get these guys back-to-back so they could kind of build up that arm strength so that, a month or 2 down the line, could kind of become more of a regular type of thing. So I think that's the defense there. But like you said, though, it was a lot of bad luck. Like, I don't think any of the guys pitched particularly bad. So I think that's a good thing at least. But at the same time, it's kind of similar going back to the Barnes thing. Like, are we trying to win this game or are we trying to get guys built up or whatever the case may be? Because I think if your goal was to win this game, then those would not have been the bullpen moves I would have made. But at the same time, you understand that we're still in April here. There's a bigger picture in mind here, and you're still getting guys built up for the long haul for this season. So I get that part. It's unfortunate that it didn't work out and they didn't come in and put up zeros like they have been, all year. Evan Phillips has been great this year. Gratterall's been great. Maranta just got here, so we can't speak as much to him, but he pitched well last night. But yeah, I was also a little confused why at that point, like when it's a 4-1 game or whatever, when it's starting to get out of reach, why not go to the guy you just called up today, Carson Fulmer, who's probably only going to be on the roster for a few days here. Because I think it was Mitch White gets placed on the COVID list today. So they're able to call him up without, having to make a 40-man roster move. So to me, once you're behind, I would have just went to him, let him pitch. Kimbrel, I get that he hasn't pitched in a week, but now does this mean that he's not available
Yeah.
tomorrow? He's another guy. He has not pitched in back-to-back games yet. So is this a plan with him? Like they want to get him in back-to-back games, or is this, if it's a save situation tomorrow, is he now burnt, which obviously would not be ideal.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that plays out. Kind of questionable moves all around in the bullpen, but I'd say I'm not as nearly as mad at the bullpen stuff as I am with the Barnes pinch hitting thing.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. Just to clean one thing up, the Phillips inning, he has a slider that breaks into the batter for a hit by pitch. He gets a seeing eye single that goes to the right-hand side. Then he gets back-to-back strikeouts. He's facing Baez with a chance to get out of the inning, and Baez is so freaking late on a fastball that he slaps it down the right field line against the shift. I mean, you could look at where the shift is and what he's trying to do with that baseball. He was not trying to slap that ball down the right field line. He was just so late on it. That turns into a single, and then Gratterall comes in, 73-mile-an-hour broken bat single with an expected batting average of 130. That scores 2 more runs. Do you want to guess what Evan Phillips' ERA is now on the year? This is a guy who retired something like 22 in a row. Do you know what his ERA is?
Small sample size, it probably ballooned a little bit. What is it in the 4s or 5s or something like that?
5.00 ERA is the most misleading statistic of the year, which is Evan Phillips' ERA.
Great. Yeah.
Throws 13 pitches, 10 of them for strikes. He ends up giving 3 earned runs on the night. Before we get to questions, folks, you can start throwing those into the chat if you'd like to. I saw a couple about what this means for the Dodgers offense, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anything else, Daniel, from this one that you want to talk about, guys that stood out to you, performances? I mean, it's worth noting Mookie Betts did finish with 2 hits, so 2 for 4. He was kind of a lone bright spot for the offense. We could do player of the game. I think that's pretty straightforward. Clayton Kershaw is going to get the player of the game every day of the week. Mookie Betts goes 2 for 4. Chris Taylor 1 for 3. Gavin Lux 1 for 3. Freddie Freeman, Trey Turner, Max Muncy, Justin Turner, Cody Bellinger, Austin Barnes, all 0 for 3 or worse. Muncy and Turner 0 for 4 in the mix as well. Anybody else or anything else that jumps out to you here?
I mean, I'd say the one other thing that I want to point out is that the Dodgers defense is still pretty bad. And that's kind of been the case all season here. So that's not exactly ideal. Like you have Chris Taylor bobbles a ball in left. He also had another back row. There's one play that I also thought, I don't think this was a big deal or anything, but on that the ball Meadows hit that ground ball to the left side that winds up scoring 2 runs. Like I think Trey could have given a little better effort just to kind of keep that in the rim, and then maybe only 1 run scores. At the end of the day, that didn't cost them the game or anything, but it's the little things that start to add up. And as a whole, the Dodger defense has not been good at all.
Yeah.
Something I've kind of been sitting on here, I haven't really mentioned it at all, but something I would strongly consider is you got Gavin Lux at second base every day. You got Chris Taylor in left field every day. For the most part, I'd probably consider flip-flopping those guys. Like I think Chris Taylor is better in the infield. We've seen Gavin Lux has had his issues throwing the ball. I think that's less of an issue in left field. I think for the most part, left field is a good spot where you could kind of hide Lux. I think he would be serviceable enough there. Like he's athletic enough that he could go get some fly balls. You don't have to throw as much from there. And I think the upgrade of Taylor playing second over Lux is significant. So I'm not sure why they haven't considered that, but to me, I'd start to consider that because I just think that would kind of make the defense better as a whole.
Yeah, at first let me say I'm glad you brought up the defense because, man, Chris Taylor bobbles the ball on what was the first run. I mean, he basically has the ball in his hand and the guy is rounding third base. So that I'm not going to say routine, but that was a risky send by the third base coach, and yet they end up scoring a run on that one. Later in the game, he has a ball where he has a chance to throw a guy out, and he throws a 3-hopper from shallow left field. They have on the ball to right field in which somebody scores. Gavin Lux catches the relay, and he throws a 2-hopper from about, basically the second base shift, the spot where the second baseman usually stands in a shift. He throws a 2-hopper to home plate. I thought Muncy made some good plays at third base. Obviously, no throwing errors. I mean, we just have to appreciate the routine, it feels like, on the Dodgers infield. But I'm glad you said something about the defense. I hadn't considered Lux and Taylor. I wonder, just thinking out loud, I wonder if they're worried about messing with Gavin Lux mentally and moving him off of second base rather than letting him work through some of his stuff. But I'm with you. I think Chris Taylor is the better defender on the infield, and maybe Gavin Lux from just an athleticism perspective. Chris Taylor is very athletic. Gavin Lux, outside of Trey Turner and Cody Bellinger, might be number 3 on the athleticism rankings. Mookie Betts somewhere in there as well. So, yeah, maybe just mixing those guys up a little bit, open some things up. I don't know. I don't know how much that actually changes, but when you said that, I was like, I hadn't thought about that, but I kind of like it.
Yeah. I don't think like it's not like it's not gonna cost the Dodgers, the division, right? Like, but at the end of the day, those little things do add up, and I think, maybe. Like with Gavin Lux, you say you want to give him confidence or whatever, but I think his throwing issue is well documented at this point, and it's not like it just started or something. Like, this is something going back to the minors. It's the main reason why a lot of people said he wasn't going to stick at shortstop, and that obviously didn't happen. He hardly plays short ever now. So to me, I just think he could kind of playing left field is kind of a little more stress free. Like, there's less responsibilities out there. You basically just gotta catch the ball and throw it. Like, there's a lot more thinking that goes on at second base. So I don't know if that's something they would even consider, but if it was up to me, I would make that change and at least see how it goes. Like, if you make that change and Gavin Lux is just an absolute disaster in left field, you could always just switch back.
Okay, let's get to some questions, some thoughts in the chat. As always, we appreciate folks joining us. This isn't necessarily a question, JRM. I guess he did phrase it as a question. Essentially, what do you think about, should Edwin Rios be getting some more playing time? Max Muncy, Justin Turner, 2 of the guys we just talked about who have struggled. Justin Turner's been doing a ton of DHing. Max Muncy playing a ton of third base. Edwin Rios, very limited, small sample size thus far this season. But, what do you think? Should Edwin Rios be getting more playing time than he currently is? He's hitting .238, 21 at-bats in 7 games. So, hard to judge him on the sample size. But, if it were you, this is a guy who, him and Hanser Alberto, it feels like they play like once a week. I'm just looking at Rios' game log. He started on Wednesday, and then his previous start before that was a full week earlier, and then he played a Monday. He did get a back-to-back. He played 3 games in a row, I should say, last week, 16th, 17th, and 18th. But aside from that, he's basically been a once-a-week player. Would you give him more playing time just to give Muncy and Turner a break and see if you could get some offensive production from Rios?
Yeah, I'd say, if he's playing once a week right now, I'd probably move it up to like 2 times a week, just because you want to keep him relevant. Like I was saying earlier, like with the DH, like there's so many less pitch hitting opportunities. So you don't want to have a guy that's just sitting on the bench all the time, because then when you do need him, he's not going to be ready to go. He's not going to be in any sort of rhythm. So I definitely think you want to play him a couple times a week. This is a guy in Edwin Rios who was absolutely, tearing the cover off the ball in spring training, and he could be an offensive weapon for you when a lot of other guys are struggling. Like, we went up and down the lineup. It's not like anyone's, going crazy right now. With that being said, though, I think, I don't think you want to, reduce Justin Turner to a part-time player or anything like that. Like, I think you still want to give him at least a few more weeks here to try and see if he could kind of get out of this. Same with Max Muncy. Like, you want to give those guys at bats to get out of their current, slumps or whatever. But at the same time, I think, playing Rios 1 extra day a week and sitting, Justin Turner or whatever for 1 day, I don't think that's going to change a whole lot. And I think, who knows, maybe Rios gets hot, and that's a guy who he kind of has to, forces your hand a little bit to give him even more playing time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Looking through some other questions, Norm says, I've said the lineups look terrible at the plate since spring training and would carry over to the regular season. Some fans didn't want to hear it. You can't just flip a switch. Norm, the only thing I'd say back, unfortunately to you, is fortunately for us, maybe unfortunately for the argument you're making, the Dodgers lead Major League Baseball in runs per game right now. So we could talk about, I knew the offense was going to be struggling. 5 runs a game, they're first in Major League Baseball. You want to talk about batting average. They're hitting .240. That's 9th in Major League Baseball. But at the end of the day, the point of offense is to score runs more than anything else. The Dodgers are doing that better than any team. I saw somebody else saying, hey, you'd think the Dodgers would get Clayton Kershaw some runs. He breaks the record. And again, I would say Clayton Kershaw has the highest, most runs scored in his starts of any pitcher in baseball prior to tonight. And so unfortunate the way that played out. But, hey, we'd rather have this, not, I don't know. He had the first start where he has the perfect game and that whole fiasco, but at least the offense got a few runs there so that we didn't have to sweat that one necessarily just as much. Looking through to see if
It's also real quick. It's also important to remember that like offense is down all across baseball right now. Like this is not just a Dodger problem. Like the baseballs are clearly dead. Like we see how many warning track shots there's been. Like who knows? Maybe with the old baseballs, those are home runs. And then we're saying how much the Dodgers are tearing the cover off the ball. So I think it's fair to say some guys are struggling and can be better, but I also don't think we need to panic and say, "Oh, I told you so." The Dodgers offense sucks. They've been bad since spring training. I don't think we need to go that far.
This is one from a couple people, Cypress Caller as well as Daniel Moreno, both kind of hint at this one. Do you think the Dodgers need to switch up the lineup? Is it something as simple as moving a few guys up, moving a few guys down? It's kind of funny that we have this conversation on a night when Mookie Betts hits a home run and has 2 hits, because typically the switch up the lineup conversation revolves around why isn't Trey Turner hitting first and why is Mookie Betts. So that's not the conversation. I don't think anybody's complaining about Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Trey Turner. Justin Turner did get moved down a little bit. He's a guy who's been hitting primarily in the cleanup spot. They moved the one guy hitting worse to him in the cleanup spot tonight. That's Max Muncy. So tonight they had Betts, Freeman, Turner. Then you've got Muncy, Turner, Bellinger in the 4, 5, 6 hole. Taylor, Lux, Barnes in the 7, 8, 9. Obviously, let's sub in Will Smith for Austin Barnes because that's typically your list. My prediction at the beginning of the year was I think Will Smith should be hitting 4th. Are there changes you would make to the lineup? Would you move Will Smith to 4th? Would you move Chris Taylor up in the lineup? What would you do?
It's tough because it's like, I'd probably move Justin Turner down a little bit, but it's like, who are you going to move up at that point? Like, Will Smith is the obvious answer. Chris Taylor, I guess, is hitting pretty well, so you can move him up a little bit. But it's like a week ago, we would have been saying move Belly up, but now it's like he can't hit anything. So these things change like on a day-to-day basis. I feel like I don't think wholesale lineup changes is necessarily going to get guys going. Sometimes it might work. So, it might be a coincidence. Who knows? I'm fine with the top 3, how it is. I'll say that. Like, I don't think you need to move Mookie out of the leadoff spot or anything like that. But I'd probably move Will Smith and Chris Taylor up a little bit and move Justin Turner down into like the 7 spot or something. Maybe that takes a little pressure off him and he gets going a little bit.
Yeah, I guess I'll ask this: Are you dead set on Freddie Freeman being a number 2 hitter on this lineup?
To be honest, and I'm pretty sure I said this before the season, I would just go Mookie and Trey 1, 2, have Freddie 3. I like having speed at the top. I'd rather have Freddie in a position where he could, those guys get on base and he could drive in more runs. So I'd maybe think about that, but I don't think that's a crazy change, and it's not like you need to do anything to get Freddie Freeman going. Like he's been one guy who's been hitting pretty well outside of tonight.
Yeah, Freddie Freeman offensively basically has the best slugging percentage on the team and the best on-base percentage on the team, as well as the best batting average on the team as well. So there you go. Freddie Freeman doing okay for himself. Maybe don't mess with that one too much. We'll go out on this last question. Matty Man 5 Dodge. This is a question right after my own heart, Daniel. Have we had enough of Austin Barnes yet?
Your answer would have been yes after his first start of the season. Although I guess
he went over on the season total for home runs in his second game. So
I guess his first few games he hit a couple homers. So he started off well, but like you said earlier, he's been like 0 for 10, 0 for 12 since then. So to me, the answer, I don't want to pile on Austin Barnes here, and I'm not saying he should never start or anything, but to me, in a big spot, even like if he starts fine, but in a big spot late in the game, I'd love to see a pinch hitter out there. I don't need to see Austin Barnes batting in a close game in the 8th inning.
Nomo Fomo says Jeff hates Barnes, LOL. Here's the thing on Barnes. Like my thing is just I understand why people like Austin Barnes because of sort of what he represents and what he stands for. He's this gritty guy who's small, feels like he hustles, he's well respected, he does the little things right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I like all of those things. I just think in most people's minds that has become so overinflated that we all ignore the fact that he's basically a 200 hitter for most of his career with no power and kind of. Yes, he's had a few big moments, and those have been World Series type moments, so credit to Austin Barnes. But, man, compared to – and on top of that, compared him to Will Smith. We're not comparing him to a league average catcher in which it's like, he's like 3% worse, so, like, what's the big deal? It's like every time he hits, it's at the expense of, a guy that you could argue is probably the Dodgers' 4th best hitter. And so that's a pretty big gap between Austin Barnes and Will Smith. So that's the reason. Now, obviously, it's also sort of become a shtick for me because everybody expects me to be the anti-Boston Barnes guy. And when he hits a home run, I get like 12 tweets on Twitter and text messages. And yet, it's amazingly silent, Daniel. You and I both know one person in my life who loves Austin Barnes and who loves to text me about Austin Barnes. And it's so weird. I haven't heard from that person tonight on my phone. It's so strange. Maybe he was at the game and maybe he'll get me a text message later. We'll see. We'll see about that. But who knows? Yeah, there you go. I mean, not to just throw this in at the end, just thinking about big pictures, a bunch of Dodgers news. Obviously, there's been a roster turnover. We mentioned Carson Fulmer getting called up today, as you mentioned, does not need to be added to the 40-man because it's a COVID thing. I didn't even realize I had missed the Reyes-Maranta transaction, the fact that Darian Nunez was DFA'd in order to make room for him. Maranta feels like a guy that when the Dodgers have a roster crunch, it feels like that's a 40-man roster spot that will be open to Tommy Kahnle or whoever, Caleb Ferguson, whoever that might be. But the other big storyline, we've got about 10 to 15 minutes left in the show, Daniel, and you haven't had a chance to sort of chime in on this. There was the Trevor Bauer news. A 2-year suspension. You and I have had multiple conversations over the past, since July 1st when he was first placed on the commissioner's exempt list. We said all along we didn't think he was going to pitch for the Dodgers again. Then the reports started coming out. People were estimating maybe a 1-year suspension. I was consistent in saying as the longer that went on, I thought that number was going to go down. Turns out that number went up. 2-year suspension. He will appeal it, but it's 2 years as of Friday, I believe, is when that came down. So 2 years from yesterday is when that suspension begins. He is without pay. That extends beyond the length of his Dodgers contract. Your thoughts and reaction to everything that took place on that front?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I was really surprised by the 2 years. Like, if you look at the history of, domestic violence cases and suspensions, no one has even come anywhere close to that. So I think, there's either stuff that happened that we don't know, which is obviously very possible. Like we see even just yesterday, like another person comes out accusing Bauer, and to no surprise, he strongly denies it. So there's either stuff that we don't know and it's really bad, or like they wanted to make an example out of him. And obviously Trevor Bauer is a very outspoken person. He has not always had good things to say about MLB and Rob Manfred. So, it's very possible that they were making an example out of him, and he said he's going to appeal it. So if this thing goes to court, MLB obviously feels that their suspension is going to be upheld. Like they felt that they feel that the punishment they dished out is appropriate. So we'll obviously see how all that plays out. But like you said, me and you have both been in the camp before all this came out that Bauer was never going to pitch for the Dodgers again. So from that perspective, I think, behind closed doors, the Dodgers were probably actually very happy with this ruling because the 2-year suspension, he's got 2 years left on his contract. So that goes right through the end of his deal. They get all that money back. They paid him for all of last season and the first few weeks of this season. But now that he's officially suspended, they don't have to pay him, which is, I mean, that's good. If you're a fan of the Dodgers, that's a good thing because now they have more money freed up. Maybe they call Trey Turner and his representation and say, hey, we got some more money to offer you now, and an extension. Obviously, going into next winter, they will now have more money to spend. So that's all good things. Obviously, they don't get Bauer pitching for them. He's obviously a very talented pitcher. But I think as we've seen so far this season, I think their pitching staff is still really, really good. Like they got a ton of depth. They got guys like Tyler Anderson, guys like Andrew Heaney before he got hurt, who we weren't expecting a whole lot from, but they've actually looked pretty good. So I think they're going to be fine in the pitching department, and they could also always go out and acquire more guys. So I'd say I was very surprised by the ruling. I'll be interested to see how that appeal plays out. But I think, above all else, I'm just kind of glad that it's kind of all over with. Like it's been almost a year now that we've just, Bauer's kind of always been at the back of our mind. Like, what are they going to do? What's going to happen? Is he going to pitch for the Dodgers? Is he not? So I think that's kind of cleared up. Like, I think we could kind of say now with certainty that he's not going to pitch for the Dodgers ever again. So I think we could kind of close that book and kind of move on from here.
I mean, I think there is still the appeal. We'll see how that plays out. Whether that would be the one sort of The door is 85% closed maybe, but 15% left open on the appeal. And it's worth noting, every other player that has been suspended under this new sort of set of rules, whatever you want to call them, has agreed to sort of a plea bargain, essentially, to say, and as a result of that, part of that has been that some of the time on the commissioner's exempt list was then counted as time served, etc. Bauer is the first person not to agree. Now, was there an offer made? Did they want to just make an example out of him? Was he so committed to sort of never being forced to admit any form of guilt that he said, I will not accept any deal. I believe I'm innocent. I don't know the details. We don't know the details, but as you said, it's the biggest suspension I think I found. I mean, aside from people that have been banned from the game for life, it is the biggest suspension that has ever been handed down by Major League Baseball. 2 full years, 334 games, 324 games for Trevor Bauer. So crazy stuff. As you point out, I think the financial stuff is really interesting, and people are saying, are the Dodgers going to spend that money? What I said when we did our live show is it definitely opens up the possibility for that. It definitely opens up, gives them more flexibility as far as what they could spend. I think they were on the hook. I know the dollars out was different, but I think each of the next 2 years, the luxury tax number, the CBT number was like 33 million, something like that. And so, we're a quarter of the way through the season. So 3/4 of that money will not count towards it. 100% of next year will not count towards it. The Dodgers have David Price coming off of the books. Trey Turner will be a free agent. They have a bunch of team options on guys like Max Muncy and Justin Turner, I believe. So there's tons of money freeing up in the future. But that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I agree with you. I think the distraction, for the most part, is now behind us, and the Dodgers can move forward. Obviously, Bauer's not going to just let this go, but it will be interesting to see how this all plays out. So, hey, folks, we appreciate you joining us. Again, the headline here, not to get sideways, Clayton Kershaw breaks the franchise record for strikeouts. Unbelievable day for him, unbelievable day for the Dodgers organization. So exciting stuff there. That's Daniel Starkand. My name's Jeff Spiegel. We appreciate you joining us on DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. As always, please subscribe, ring the notification bell here on YouTube. If you're a podcast person, please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast, whether it's on Apple or Spotify. If you're not a podcast person, download the podcast app, download Spotify, subscribe, rate, and review. That really helps our show. Check out DodgerBlue1958 on social media, and of course, DodgerBlue.com for a post-game on this. I'm sure we'll have some great quotes, some great interviews and press conferences up on our YouTube page as well. Clayton Kershaw, Dave Roberts addressing much of what we've talked about. So again, that's Daniel. My name's Jeff. We appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your night. We'll see you next time.